Tonight on World News, force of nature, a strange storm in New York, a parade of hurricanes tearing across the ocean. Is this evidence of the new age of global warming?
Wildfires and heat waves are more intense.
What used to be the extreme, literally becoming the new normal.
Hurricane Katrina was the first urban extinction.
And scientists are worried that the sustained droughts are consistent with the overall trend toward global warming.
Far heavier downpours. They'll be more frequent now, say scientists, as global warming heats the air.
It's easy to get lulled into believing these wild claims because we hear them over and over again. But if you don't want to be hustled, you have to check the deck. You have to make sure that all the cards are exposed, not just the ones the con man want you to see. So let's see what other scientists and data have to say about all these alarming claims.
It is misleading and just plain incorrect to claim that disasters associated with hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, or drought have increased on climate timescales either in the United States or globally.
All of the indicators of extreme weather are absent.
It's not a theoretical issue what the weather would be like below 350 parts per million CO2 because until the year 1988 the CO2 was below 350 parts per million. So if you look through the historical record you see that the weather was just as bad or possibly worse below 350 ppm.
It is further incorrect to associate the increasing costs of disasters with the emission of greenhouse gases. Some activists, politicians, journalists, corporate and government agency representatives, and even scientists who should know better have made claims that are just unsupportable based on evidence and research.
The more powerful hurricanes are mainly due to man-made global warming.
Typhoons and hurricanes are getting stronger.
Hurricanes have not increased in the U.S. in frequency, intensity, or normalized damage since at least 1900. The same holds for tropical cyclones globally since at least 1970 when we have good data.
We are in the weakest hurricane period since records started being kept in 1900.
Of course, our hurricane luck could run out at any time, but the data shows that anyone claiming an increase in hurricane activity due to global warming is off base.
The forecast from hell. Why America may see more killer tornadoes.
Tornadoes have not increased in frequency, intensity, or normalized damage since at least 1950. And there's some evidence to suggest they've actually declined.
And if you look at NOAA plots of severe tornadoes, they've actually generally been declining since the 1970s.
And it's making the droughts much more likely and more intense.
Globally, and I quote from a recent paper in Nature, there has been little change in drought over the past 60 years. Drought has, and here I quote the IPCC, for the most part become shorter, less frequent, and cover a smaller portion of the U.S. over the last century.
A record winter of rain and flood. More evidence of global warming.
Floods have not increased in the U.S. in frequency or intensity since at least 1950. And remarkably, flood losses as a percentage of U.S. GDP have dropped by 75% since 1950.
One of the giants in the history of the philosophy of science, Karl Popper, once famously observed that a theory that explains everything explains nothing. And to be sure, the theory of catastrophic anthropogenic climate change appears to explain everything. After all, we all know that climate change makes for shorter winters, except for when it makes for harsher winters, and climate change means less snow, except for when climate change means more snow, and climate change causes droughts in California and floods in Texas and Oklahoma, and generally makes wet places wetter and dry places drier, except when it makes wet places drier and dry places wetter, and climate change causes more hurricanes at the same time as it causes less hurricanes. Climate change causes more rain but less water, and less rain but more water? Climate change decreases the spread of malaria at the same time as it increases the spread of malaria, but don't worry, the Terminator himself advises us not to listen to those climate change cynics. Hey guys? Do I need to go on? Oh, okay. Climate change makes San Francisco foggier. Climate change makes San Francisco less foggy. Climate change causes duller autumn leaves. Climate change causes more colorful autumn leaves. Climate change makes for less salty seas. Climate change makes for saltier seas. Climate change causes the polar ice caps to melt. Climate change causes the polar ice caps to freeze. Climate change makes the Earth hotter, unless the Earth isn't getting hotter, in which case climate change can explain that too. What's the problem here? This sounds like the perfect scientific theory. It can explain literally everything, including self-contradictory things. This means it's absolutely perfect, isn't it? Well, no, not according to Karl Popper and the philosophers of science. And within the philosophy of science, there's something called the demarcation problem. How do you differentiate science from pseudoscience? If you're at all interested in this, I would suggest you read through Karl Popper's Conjectures and Refutations, in which he lays out his criterion for differentiating science and pseudoscience, namely falsification.